Hello all and welcome to the Great Indian Alexa Hackathon webinar. Today with us we have Karthik Ragubathy and Sohan Maheshwar from Team Amazon Alexa to take you through this webinar. If you have any questions during the duration of the webinar, you're free to post it on the questions tab on the tool. Over to you guys.
Hey everybody, welcome to this webinar. Thank you for joining in. My name is Sohan. I'm an Alexa Evangelist in the Alexa team.
And I'm Karthik Ragubathy, and I'm a Solutions Architect with the Alexa team.
So today we're going to talk to you a little bit about building games on Alexa, on how you can actually build a voice game from start to finish. Now, we personally think that in voice, gaming is one of those areas that hasn't been really looked in as much,
right?
And that's why we're creating this hackathon, and we're glad that all of you all are participating. So tune in for the rest of the webinar, where we'll be telling you some tips and tricks and some coding and voice design to actually build a great game on Alexa. Just to give you some background, if y'all are not familiar, Amazon actually does a lot of work in the gaming space. So these are just few of the initiatives that Amazon's part of. We have GameSparks, we have Twitch, which is a game streaming platform. We have a GameOn SDK, which we'll talk about a bit later. And we have things like Lumberyard and Alexa, of course. And all of this encompasses our global infrastructure services. We have pre-built game services, we have tools, we have content creation. Right. So Amazon's fairly involved in the whole gaming space as well. And I think people should actually take notice of that. All right. So voice has always been in the game, and what happens next is up to you. I think if you really think back at the sort of games that we played growing up, Karthik, so obviously there were the outdoor games, right? We played cricket, football, etc. But I'm sure growing up, you played a lot of book cricket in class.
Yeah.
Exactly, when your teacher is teaching something and you're playing book cricket.
Always in the maths class.
Yes, in maths class for some reason. And I know, so those games really stick out to me. I still remember very vividly those games. And I think the reason we do is because most of those games happened in our imagination.
Exactly.
Right? You'd play, it was a 6, it was a 4, it was a wicket, you'd be playing against the person sitting next to you, but you'd imagine like a Sachin hitting a 6 or, or like a Kumble taking a
only
wicket.
Time I can hit a century in a cricket.
Yeah, so I think it was so powerful because all of this happened in our imagination, right? And we were speaking, me and whoever was sitting next to me, we were speaking about the game, but it was very powerful.
Yes.
And similarly, in the Western world, and maybe if you all have played it, there's a game called Dungeons and Dragons, which millions of people across the world play. Right. Most of the game happens in the collective imagination of the people. It's completely voice-based, but like I said, it's such a powerful medium. And that's why I'm saying it's such an unexplored territory so far, if you ask me personally. And I think it's going to be very big soon. So like I said, voice has always been in the game, right? And what happens next is really up to you. Now, this ties in very well with our sort of philosophy of Alexa Everywhere. Right. It's not just about like an Echo Dot that sits in your house. We really see the future as a voice-first future, where you're interacting with your machines via voice. So that could be at your home, but also on the go, on your headphones or on your car, but even at your workplace or maybe in the bank, maybe in the supermarket.
True.
Now, let's dive straight in, right? And let's look at some voice-first games that are already popular. These are some examples of global games that are even popular here in India. We have Jeopardy, which is a very, very famous quiz in the US. In fact, right now, there is a greatest of all time Jeopardy that's been going on. Which is one of the most viewed sports events in the world. Like after Super Bowl, it is the second right now. So you can imagine the excitement behind that. And they have a game. So they take the host Alex Trebek's voice, make a game. They have new content. It's very powerful. We also have a couple of games like Magic Door, Yes Sire, and Rock Paper Scissors, which I'm sure you all have played different variants on. All very popular games. We have played this in the office. We've had some fun with it too.
Yeah.
So do check it out if you haven't. We have some voice-first games in India as well, and I'm so glad that people in the community have actually gone ahead and built these great experiences. Let's talk about each of them. Like we have Impossible Bollywood Quiz.
And I think that's like one of my favorite games, the Impossible Bollywood Movie Quiz. And what really propagates the game scenario more is like the Amazon Alexa Echo devices are a social device. Like I keep it in my house, in my dining room, but I also keep it in my living room, right? And then I have some friends come over, and I say to them that, hey, you know what? Here's a cool game called as Hackinator. Why don't you try this out? Or let's try out your Bollywood trivia. And that's when I try out a game like this. Right? And maybe
should we try it out?
Let's try it out.
We have a device with
so we have a device here, and I'll just try and see if we can get that on the screen. Yes, we can. So this game is called the Impossible Bollywood Movie Quiz, and let's try. And Alexa, open impossible Bollywood quiz.
जी हुजूर, इम्पॉसिबल बॉलीवुड क्विज में वापस आने के लिए शुक्रिया। डॉन को पकड़ना मुश्किल ही नहीं तो क्या है? A. Pumpkin, B. नामुमकिन या C. Boring,
B. नामुमकिन।
B. नामुमकिन। जी हुजूर, सही फरमाया। ये लाइन डॉन फिल्म से है। अगला सवाल।
Alexa,
बस
stop.
इम्पॉसिबल बॉलीवुड क्विज खेलने के लिए
So you can see a couple of things about the game, right? So the very first thing that I did was when the game started, and they have a very good icon, and that's where it just captures the user's attention. That hey, that is Gabbar Singh, and anyone who has watched Hindi movies or is a fan of Bollywood movies, they would know Gabbar Singh, right? And they have a really good logo, and that attracts them for the first time. And now we have played this game so many times. When I open the game again, it doesn't say that, hey, welcome to the game, here are the rules, blah, 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 blah. It just gets directly into the game. It says, okay, here's a question, what's the answer for that? Because I've set already a level of familiarity with this game.
But the first couple of times you logged in, it told you about the rules, it told you what you can do, things like that.
Exactly.
Yes.
And I think a really great stuff, what I love about this skill is it also has some hilarious wrong answers, right? So like pumpkin, namumkin, boring, right? So that really makes a game stick
and
out.
keeps you engaged.
Exactly.
So this was just one example, and we also learned that Karthik is good at Bollywood trivia today. And there are a few other examples, and we'll be taking you through some skill breakdowns later in today's presentation. But you can take a look at some of the type of games that are actually popular here in India. We have trivia, of course. We have simple things like the shadow game where you have to repeat what Alexa says, which gets increasingly tougher. We also have something called Ganga Quest, which is a choose your own adventure type game. Now, that is a genre that's very popular on voice, where it creates this immersive, atmospheric adventure for you, and the story and everything changes based on the choices that you make in the game. And for those of y'all who have seen Bandersnatch on Netflix, it's kind of like that, where you can choose like different endings, and theoretically there are like infinite, or maybe not infinite, but just a large number of endings. So the replayability of the game also is very high.
Exactly.
So based on the choices you make, people have different endings, and that's cool because we both can watch Bandersnatch or play Ganga Quest and come back the next day and say, hey man, this is how my skill ended, or this is how my game ended, how did yours end?
Exactly.
Right? And it's so different, and it's great to actually compare the two.
Right. And if you remember, there were these books when we were studying in school, R.L. Stein, Goosebumps.
Yes, Goosebumps,
And you could always it would go to one page and it would say flip a coin. If it was heads, go to page number 32. But if it's tails, go to something like that. So really kind of an interesting game to play out here.
So we showed you a few games that are popular on Alexa, both globally and in India, and these are straight up games on Alexa. But like I said, voice doesn't just mean, hey, this is a voice game on Alexa, right? There are so many different ways you can interact. So let's take a look at some of it. One is where you have something called a voice paired game. There are these things called echo buttons, which are these buzzer-like buttons that you can hit, and you can pair those to your device. So we have things like button bandits, or quiz games where the first to buzz in actually answers. And we've played this in Office quite a bit, where and it's a lot of fun. So you buzz in and you guess like a brand's logo. There's this pretty cool hostage game actually, where the more buttons you have, the more fun it is. Where it'll show you this, or it'll tell you, hey, the pattern to unlock or to defuse the bomb is red, blue, green, blue. Right, and you'll have to hit the buttons in that order, and it gets increasingly more difficult. So it's a lot of fun, right? So games like this, and these are voice paired games where they work with another device. And there is a gadgets API, there's a buttons API, so you can use all of them to actually create interesting experiences.
And another way to look at this is it can be also paired with a physical board. One of the skill that is there is when in Rome, right? Or my favorite, Saint Noir. Right, and what that skill basically does is there's a physical game board that you have to buy, and you get some game cards, and you have to find out who killed the character, the main character, and the skill gives you hint accordingly when you play around with the game. So I think that's agency that we were talking about, where Alexa is extending into agency. Maybe you could build a skill like where Alexa is just a quiz master or just a host master, or like say for example you are playing what's that game called, Housey, right? And you want Alexa to keep a track of people, whatever numbers have been taken out, right? Or Alexa to just give us a random number, and Alexa just keeps all of that in a number, right, in a sheet. So something like that, where Alexa just acts. The skill is not being actively used for playing the game, but it's just the quiz conductor kind of thing.
We also have games where computer games where Alexa acts as a voice assistant to the game. So if any of you all have played Call of Duty 2, or if you have played, one of the Call of Duties, I don't remember which one, there are way too many, and also Destiny 2, these games have assistants within the game. So instead of pausing the game and hitting like a hotkey to go and access that assistant, you can just say, Alexa, open this Call of Duty thing, and it'll tell you, okay, here's where you go. This is your map. This is where your teammates are. This is your mission. This is how much health you have. So it's acting like that assistant within your game. Right. And I think that just adds this other dimension to how you're playing the game. It's getting more immersive. You're using your voice. You're using like a keyboard, using visual senses. So we're getting to this really immersive state where you can actually
and funny thing about that, I recently bought an PS4 and I play a lot of Fortnite. And when you're playing a lot of games on the multiplayer mode, one of the things that you tend to do is you're chatting with your players, right, your team members, and you keep asking them, hey, where are you? Hey, how do I do this? Or how do I do this? And with a voice assistant game, like say a Fortnite skill, I could always ask Alexa, how do I do this in Fortnite? Right? And Alexa would just help me out with that, right? And that's like the entire agency of a voice assistant game skill, is that it just stays there and helps me play the game in a proper or a better way.
Absolutely. So like Karthik mentioned, it's not just about games on Alexa, although that is the point of the hackathon, but think about how you can really sort of extend the player's agency. It's not just about that one device and a game there. So like Karthik said, you could be playing on a PlayStation and still have like Alexa help out with your game there, or maybe it's like a board game that Alexa is helping out with.
Right.
And this is one of the reasons why we think voice is just going to be big in the gaming world.
Right.
And also, it gives you a chance to sort of connect players globally in the way that maybe console and PC really didn't. Like a keyboard mouse is not the interface to maybe connect players globally in a live setting where you're talking to people and you're having that collaborative experience while playing a game. And I think one very, very unique thing about voice and gaming is the fact that voice really brings analog to the digital realm and vice versa.
Exactly.
Right? So you mentioned how we have a board game which is analog, right? You have a board, you have a dice and whatever, but you're bringing this component of Alexa. So you can have like new levels, you can have new variations, you can keep having like a lot of dynamic content there.
Exactly.
And so you're bringing that digital realm to this.
Right, and you can just extend your entire gameplay. Earlier, you would just have like a single Monopoly board or a single game board, and your your entire moves would be limited. But with Alexa, you could just have endless possibilities as to what you can build, right?
And as a game dev, I can look at it in a way that, hey, this is unlimited for my user, right? So I just make some change in the backend, I add a new level every month,
right?
And there you go.
Exactly.
And I think voice allows for gaming on the go. In a way, again, that I think mobile probably didn't, right? Especially if you're driving, you don't want to be playing a game and drive. So voice allows you to have that sort of engagement and have that sort of thing while going.
Exactly.
It also keeps kids very entertained.
On a long drive. And I was just thinking about it. Like, say for example, you wanted to play a game like what's it called? Name place animal thing, right? And you want to play a game like that, and you're on a long drive, you could always have an Alexa skill which just says that, hey, Alexa, open name place animal thing, and Alexa would say, okay, you have to come up with A or B or C or D, and then everyone comes up with that, and everyone gets points for that, right? Something like that.
And I think fundamentally, it's all about how voice actually invites deeper engagement. I think we have just sort of scratched the surface on what is possible on voice and gaming. And I think that once you see like more immersive adventures and more immersive games, you'll really see like very deeper engagement when it comes to the games and the users. So also in the future, everyone's looking at not just Amazon, but a whole bunch of companies across the world. They're looking at a lot of investments in ambient computing and ambient technology. So if you just follow the news from CES, which is the biggest electronics show in the world, it was all about voice again, voice in everything from shower heads to cars and everything in between. So in the future, you will see a lot more categories of games. You will see a lot of customer excitement about this. And you'll see a lot of brand engagement as well when it comes to voice in games. So this is definitely a space to look out for.
And now we've also made the ground for why develop for voice, right? And how to why games are a good use case for voice, right? One of the things that I keep seeing is and developers, and most of you are here today to understand, hey, how can I design a really good game? Because that's what is going to make you win the hackathon, right? Really good game that stands out in the crowd, right? And the game design is really good, and that's what we are going to be talking about. And principally, when you talk about voice design principles for games, there are 6 different principles that you need to keep in mind when you are developing for games, right? On voice, right? And one of the very first thing to keep in mind is to keep it voice first, right?
Yeah.
And this is like the name of the revolution, just to keep the skill voice first. And this is very important, because one of the most popular selling devices for us is the Echo Dot, right? And the Echo Dot does not have visuals along with it, right? So it's a voice first device. It only if the user only interacts with voice, right? So you want to make sure that the skill works really good if it does not have a screen. But what we also do is we also do something like voice plus supporting visuals, right? So you could have some designs using something called as APL, which is the Alexa presentation language.
And we've done a lot of webinars on that if you want to.
Exactly. And one of the things with APL is that it is for screen-based devices. So that means like an Echo Show 5 or an Echo Show, or even Fire TV for that matter. People can play games on that using their Alexas. Inbuilt Alexa, right? But like I said, it should always be voice first and then support the visuals next. So that's how go around building a game, right? And one of the things that you might see when you are building a voice first skill is a voice first game is that you need to keep in mind how to make it more engaging, right? How to have SSML, speech cons, sounds, and images to enrich the engagement for users, right? And one of the things that we pointed out here is SSML, and this is the most important thing. And SSML is basically speech synthesis markup language, which is a W3C standard. And if you are using the Ask SDK, you could just say handler input dot response builder dot speak this output speech uses SSML. Right? And what this is going to do is it's going to just make Alexa have a bit more of personality.
Yeah.
And this is very important, right?
Absolutely, because there's a big difference between a computer reading out words versus conversation, like how we are having right now.
Right.
And SSML actually enables you to do that.
True. And when you go to the skill builder, there is an option called as the voice and tone editor. In the test simulator, you can see the voice and tone editor, and there is a link there to the SSML tags that the Alexa developer console supports. But apart from that, you can also use something called as Amazon Poly, which is from the AWS team. And Amazon Poly is basically, you can use different voices. And think of a role-playing game where you want 2 different characters, right? And you would want Alexa to speak in their voice, right? So one of the way that you can do that is by writing something like this, where
and it's so straightforward and simple. A lot of people think there's a lot of code, so they sometimes skip it. But honestly, literally, what you see on screen is just the code needed, right? You just write voice name, and that gives you so much more depth to your skill.
Yeah, and so for example, you look at this one, right, where Alexa has switches between 2 voices, Brian and Kendra. Let's just see how this sounds like.
Hey Brian, what's your favorite color?
Well, Alexa, my favorite is obviously blue.
What about you, Kendra? Am I allowed to have 2? They would be green and purple. Okay, thank you.
Right, so that's how Alexa sounds like, right? And at this point, one more important thing that I want you to focus on when you are building SSML skills is to take the right amount of pauses. Right? I'm pretty sure if I kept on speaking, right, the first person to get irritated would be Sohan, because hey, when are you going to let me speak, right? But the second person to get irritated would be you guys, right? Because I cannot keep on going speaking again and again. I need to have certain engagement with other people as well, right? And a lot of Alexa skills, what happens is the response is like, okay, I open the game. The first experience is going to be something like, say, for example, I said, Alexa, open space facts. And then Alexa will speak for the next 5 minutes or next 1 minute. And I'm standing there and I'm really impatient, right? And so maybe use this pause tag in SSML. There's a pause option as well. Use it to keep in right pauses and keep your responses short. That is like the biggest improvement I would suggest for some of the skills, so that what would happen is your skill gets to the user first. And you can always keep all of those things under your help section and stuff like that whenever a user asks for it. But otherwise, just don't give all the information at the same time and keep on doing that, right? And the cool thing about Poly is that it also supports multiple language. So it can do something like Hans. There's a voice name called as Hans, and that's in Germany, right? And then Celine in France and Giorgio in Italian. So it can actually have Alexa. You can actually have Alexa speak it out in a French accent, right?
So you can get Alexa to both speak in French and speak English in a French accent.
Exactly.
So this is an example of where we're using the voice in the right language that it's meant to be used. So for instance, Hans is going to speak German and Celine is going to speak French, and it sounds great, right? If you just get Alexa to read out these words, it would read it out as it were in English, so the accent and the dialect just isn't right. But here you'll notice that it's all right. So let's listen to it.
So I can speak several languages.
Anfangen ist gleich Beharren eine Kunst.
Quand on n'a pas ce que l'on aime, il faut aimer ce que l'on a.
La familia è la patria del cuore.
A río revuelto. Ganancia de pescadores.
Yeah, so the enunciation, the dialect is perfectly how it is in that natural language. So it sounds very cool.
Exactly. And you can always try one more thing, is if you have the voice but you give them the wrong language, and we don't have a demo for that, but basically in the same code what you could do is voice name is equal to Hans, but language is equal to equal to France, right? So something like that. And that's that way Alexa would just speak French in a Germany person's voice, right? So that kind of sometimes makes for hilarity. So if you want to put that into your skill sometime, you can definitely do that.
I think we do have a demo of that, but let's
see that. And one of the things about and this is very important, right? How to make voice more engaging, right? So one of the things is like and you might have seen this in Bollywood movies. Bollywood seems to be हमने तुम्हें चारों तरफ से घेर लिया है, right? Something like that. And you can almost change that and put some dramatics into the voice, and half the time a lot of games make out really good because of the dramatics in the voice, right? So take for that matter this entire text that we have written in there. The simple way to say that is, we have Shiraj, you have 3 minutes to find him at the abandoned warehouse. If you contact the police, we'll kill him, right? So let's just see how this sounds.
You have 3 minutes to find him at the abandoned warehouse. If you contact the police, we kill him.
This is very simple, right?
Simple, straightforward Alexa's voice,
right? But sometimes you might want a villainous sound, right? And at that time you could maybe do something like Hans and make him speak English, right? In Germany voice, right? So let's just see how that sounds.
You have Shiraz. You have 3 minutes to find him at the abandoned warehouse. If you contact the police, we kill him.
Right, so that's setting up the tone for kind of manipulating the voice a bit, and almost putting in a mystic element in the game.
And if you have multiple characters, it's a great way to differentiate between these characters too.
Right.
If you just have Alexa's voice throughout, maybe a user will be like, hey, is this the hero? Is this the villain?
Exactly.
But now you've thrown in this one element that can instantly differentiate between a character.
Exactly. And you can also use some sound effects, right? And the sound effects, like you say, I open the door, and then actually open a door, and we have a sound library as well, which you can use. You would find it at the SSML page. And this is how the code looks like. It just says, I open the door, and then give the URL for the audio source. And this is how it sounds like.
Yeah, and there are thousands of sounds that you can choose from, everything from glass breaking to doors creaking, to animals, to a whole bunch of things. So you can add these small elements, which are like sonic cues, which add that atmospheric element within your skill.
Right. And in conclusion for this SSML tab is that, hey, can we make it more engaging by using audio? And that's where the entire game is, right? If you could use some right audio files and the right audio cues to let the user understand that, hey, okay, this is something that's happening in the game, and engage them. So just wrapping it up with this.
You have 3 minutes to find him at the abandoned warehouse. If you contact the police, we'll kill him.
Exactly. So what happened was I received a phone call, and then it said, we have Siraj, 3 minutes to, you have 3 minutes to find him or we'll kill him, right? In Han's voice.
Yeah.
And then he puts down the phone and almost setting the entire, the arena for the game.
Correct. And by this time, you have visualized that entire scene.
Exactly, right?
You have visualized the whole scene, so you don't have to take that extra effort. Using sound, you have just made the user.
Exactly. So gotta go and find Shiraz now. But yeah, and over to you, Sohan, about simple commands.
Yeah. So we're also going to talk a little bit about, I think, being voice first is we spoke about the output, what you're hearing, but you also want what the user has to say has to be voice first.
Right.
You can't expect the user to say these long-winded commands because they might get confused. Alexa might not understand, it might not be intuitive. So you need to keep it very simple. Especially if you're building stuff for kids, you need to keep it as simple as possible because children, shorter attention spans, they might not know the exact words to say. So remember about keeping things simple. So here are a few examples. So Yes Sire is another choose your own adventure game where you get to either follow path A or path B, open door 1, open door 2. So throughout the game you're presented with choices, and the most of the choices come down to yes or no answers.
Right.
And that keeps things very simple, but it focuses a lot on the atmospheric element. So it creates this immersive element, and all you have to do is sort of imagine that and say yes and no, and it creates that.
Exactly. And it's just easy for the user to just deal with the skill.
Absolutely.
You don't have to do something like so like when you're playing the game on a PlayStation, right? And I've been trying to learn it for a while. You have to okay, press this button and press this button, and then something like that happens.
Right.
And you don't want that in the voice arena where you are telling the user that, hey, you have to say this and this to make the game work. No one likes that experience.
Exactly. And you don't want to keep things too open-ended as well. Saying something like you see a red car in front of you, what do you do? The user does know, hey, should I say open the door? Should I key the ignition? Should I take the car, drive the car? It's keeping things too open-ended, right? So you'd rather present choices, or you say, hey, you see a car in front of you, do you want to drive it or not? And all you have to say is yes or no, right? And if you say no, something else happens. If you say yes, something happens. You're keeping things simple and straightforward. Similarly, there's a high-low game, which, by the way, the code is on GitHub. Check out github.com/Alexa. It's a simple number game where you try and guess a number. And all you have to do as a user is to just guess numbers, saying, hey, is it 52? Is it 21? Is it 38? You're keeping things simple. Even a child or, even an adult can play this, not complicating things. So keep things simple when you're expecting your users to say something. And of course, you can say things like yes or no if you want to continue the game or not. Now, when it comes to things like voice input, think of slots and use slots basically to capture yes, no, and things like numbers. Remember, there's no slot type for things like last name or email address. A lot of users, I think, try and ask for email address via voice, which is not a practice we recommend. For instance, my email address or Karthik's email address could be karthik8@data9.co.in, or mine could be sohan1@gmail.com. Now it's impossible for even you right now to say if my ID would be Sohan followed by the number 1 or ONE or WON, because all of these sound the same. So don't ask for email IDs via voice. It's only going to lead to more confusion. People have complicated email IDs with dots and underscores and or UNDRSCORE in it. So don't do that. There are other ways you can ask for such details. One of the ways is by using something called Alexa account linking, where essentially the first time the user uses the skill, you say, hey, please link your account to continue. Now, this is a one-time thing a user does, and they have to do it on the Alexa companion app or on the website, where the user enters an email ID or a password or a username password, and that account is linked with the skill. So that way the skill has things like details that are associated with your account, like your email ID and a couple other details. and then you can go ahead and do it. Again, make sure this is a one-time thing. It's a bad experience to do this, like every time a user uses a skill.
Right, and a good point on that. So the very first thing is, why do you need the user's email address or their account linking, right? So the very first thing is, maybe you might want to tell them that, hey, there's a new championship happening this week on their email address. And that's totally understandable. You want their email address for some reason, right? And what I would suggest is, before you actually ask for the user's email address, it's good to first establish some trust.
Absolutely.
And maybe it could be something like, hey, I open a game, right? And let's say, for this matter, we have the high-low game,
right?
And let's say the high-low game has a leaderboard, and every week you get, all the users get to compete for the leaderboard. Very simple thing, right? And what you as a game developer can do is let the user play the game first. The user plays the game. The user says, Alexa, open high-low game. The game opens up, and then the user asks, the user guesses the number correct. Now, once the user has guessed the number correct, it means they are in that happy state of, they have completed the happy path.
Yeah.
And you have kind of established a bit of trust that, hey, I think you like this game, right? So maybe you could say something like, okay, great job finishing the first game. We run a leaderboard contest every week, and with exciting prizes or something like that. And would you want to sign up? And if the user says yes, okay, I've sent the notification to your email address, to your Alexa app. Please give me the permissions for your email address, right? Something like that. And just precluding that is account linking, right? Account linking should be only used when you absolutely need the user to sign in with an OAuth system and use their APIs, right? Without that, it just doesn't make a lot of sense.
And if you do it without that good reason, it only adds that one layer of friction.
Exactly.
So make sure you have that good reason to actually link an account. Now, that is one way of getting like an email ID, but there's also a slightly better way if you only want email ID, which is a customer information API, where there are two things basically. You can get things like device addresses, which is like, city and full name. So you can address the user by name saying, hey, welcome back to the skill Karthik or something like that. But you also get customer profile, which is a name, email, phone number. Of course, the user has to give permission for this explicitly, but it's always good to, again, establish some trust and maybe then ask for this piece of information.
Right, and this is where you can always, what you could do is, if you absolutely need the name, or one of the tips that I had was, if you absolutely need the name, what you could do is, when you start the game, you could say that, for now, I'm going to call you as some name, right? Some funnily made random name generator. And at the end, you can say, hey, this is the name that I have for you, but if you give me access to your customer profile, I can capture your name, and the benefit for this is your name will show up on the leaderboard or something like that, right? So that's one way to handle this, and using customer profile APIs help with that.
So we spoke a little bit about things like account linking, and maybe that's the first time a user is logging in. Let's talk about how to actually recognize your users and why it's important in game skill.
Now, that is the most important thing, right? What happens is, users are coming to your skill. They see your skill somewhere, maybe on a website, or maybe on an app or on Facebook. And the very first thing that they do is, Alexa, open the game, or whatever is your game, right? And what you can do at this point is, you can always say, hey, welcome new user. Here's an overview of the skill. Do you want to hear the rules, right? Now, this is very important, because a lot of times, the game developers that I have seen, what they do is they put the game rules in the description itself,
right?
And sometimes the user reads it, or so there's this really good game called as Chidiya Ud, and we all know how Chidiya Ud game plays, right? You just say Chidiya Ud, things that fly, and if it flies, you lift your finger. If not, you just keep it there, and the person who lifts it loses the game, basically, right? And this was a game built by Sri Chaitanya from Soup Studios, and they built a really good skill called as Chidiya Ud, right? And when you open the Chidiya Ud skill, right, they just tell you what the rules are, right? Maybe because a lot of people know what Chidiya Ud is, you can take that assumption on their behalf, and you can ask them that, hey, do you want to hear the rules?
Yeah.
because maybe the user does not want to hear the rules. They've seen it somewhere and they just want to get to the game directly. So just say, do you want to hear the rules? If the user says no, okay, let's start the game.
Yeah, you're diving straight in.
Try straight into the game. That is one of the most important things when it's a new user. But another thing that happens is when you open the skill, right, and you're engaging with the game and you've got a call to attend or you got a chore to do, right, and you leave the game in the middle, right? How do you handle that?
Yeah, that absolutely, which I think brings us to our next point, which is about quick session recovery. Now, especially on voice, there are tendencies where either user is distracted or they get a phone call, someone knocks on the doorbell, where they can maybe leave the skill in between. And it's important to really recognize when they come back to the skill immediately, right? And having that quick session recovery is important. So something as simple as, hey, welcome back, you left off in the middle of your previous game, or hey, let's resume, your previous guess was this, guess another number,
right?
Something like that, where you're not saying, hey, welcome back, but let's start all the way from
starting. Do you want to hear the rules of the game again?
Exactly.
Right.
So I think all this sort of points towards being very contextual.
Right.
Where a user is logged into a skill or a game for the first couple of times, you maybe want to ask them saying, hey, do you want to hear the rules?
Exactly.
Here's, etc. But also if they leave in the middle, come back and saying, hey, here's where you left off. But say they've been playing the game for 20 days and they're really good at it. Don't say, hey, do you want to hear the rules? It's pretty obvious that they know what the rules are.
Exactly. And this is, I think, one of the most important thing we are going to be judging skills on that criteria, because what happens is I have invested some time with your skill. So don't treat me like a new user again and again.
Absolutely.
And that is very important, because I come back into the skill. That means I want to play the game. And like if you just look at this game that we just played, Impossible Bollywood Movie Quiz, what it did was the very first time you open it, it tells you the rules.
Yeah.
But after that, you don't, need to know the rules at all. But you could always say something like, Alexa, tell me the rules, and it would tell you the rule, right? And
or help me out.
Help me out or something like that. That is something that it can do. And that is very important, right? Maybe you are making a game where there is a leaderboard element. Maybe you could do something like, welcome back, you are right now in the third position on the leaderboard. Play one more game and maybe you can beat the top scorer, Sohan, right? Something like that. And that way you can just make the skill more engaging and more exciting for the user to use.
Absolutely.
Now, one of the things I think when you talk about games is leveling up.
Yep.
Right? A game should have levels, right? And this is very important, because a game, if a user keeps on coming to the same game again and again, they might get bored. And what makes people stick to a game is the leveling thing, right?
I've always said that any game you played, right, from the 8-bit days to like a PS4, whatever, is the best games are the ones that are easy to get into but hard to master.
Exactly.
Right? And the ones that get that mix just right are the best games you've played. Just think of all the amazing games you've played so far, right? You get into it, hey, this is so easy, you're like level 1, level 2, and suddenly the level's tough, and you're like, I really need to
finish this, man.
And it's like 12 hours later, and you're still playing.
I remember GTA Vice City, and there's this really tough mission in there where you have to take a helicopter, and you have to press put the detonator on all the levels, and that's like so difficult, right? And that's a very good point, Sohan. And when a user comes into your game skill, the natural way for you to treat them is to keep it very easy. So maybe you just start with saying that, hey, here's an easy question, or here's an easy level, right? And people just finish it. And there's that thing of happiness that, hey, I've completed this. And then you start to kind of make the levels a bit more tough. And then people start to be like, okay, hey, you know what? This is getting tougher. And it's getting progressively tougher. It's not like the moment I used it, it's like, okay, what's this into this or something like that. And I don't know the answer and I leave the game. It's earlier it was an easy game.
Right.
Then it became a bit more complicated. And then slowly and slowly and slowly, you kind of made it a bit harder to play. that makes the users come back to the skill, right? It's almost like a brain teaser. People would come back and say that, hey, you know what, maybe I should solve it this way, or they would apply some different strategies. Things like that. Keep that in mind when you're building a game skill.
Absolutely.
And of course, one of the most important things why games are kind of better, or people play a game is for the social validation.
Oh, absolutely. And
right?
the competition.
And the competition, right? And very important thing to do that is, like for example, I'm playing Fortnite. And I keep on playing so that I become the last person on the island, right? And in that context, a very important thing is scoring and leaderboards.
Yes. I think a lot of games need, it's called a game and it's called gamification for a reason. Right? Of course, we play it for enjoyment, we play it, to keep our mind off other things maybe. But at the end of the day, you want some sort of scoring mechanism or some sort of validation mechanism. And very often that is points or coins or lives or whatever. And you also want to compare with other people that you know. And I think that's a very strong mechanism within a game.
Right.
So just to give an example, it's very easy to build a leaderboard into a game. And the image that you see on screen is how a database would look, right? Where you have like a user ID, and it could be ranked on, say, the number of games played. As simple as that. Or it could be ranked on the scores that people get, where you have a rank, and people could say, hey, what's my rank in the leaderboard, and so on. And I think this sort of builds a multiplayer model, not just a local multiplayer model, but all the people who are playing a game worldwide or countrywide or whatever. And I think it really encourages repeat usage and competition.
True.
Someone who's rank 2 and is very close to rank 1 might say, hey, I almost got it. I let me just play it a few more times, and that's what brings them back. And you suddenly start increasing the levels, and it gets more and more engaging.
Right. And as a skill developer, you don't need to worry a lot about where you are going to host all this stuff. The most we have something called as the GameOn SDK.
Do check it out. Not too many people know about it, but
it's a GameOn SDK. It's available in Node.js as well. Just go to alexa.design/GameOn. It handles everything from player management to tournaments.
Yeah, you can run like monthly tournaments, you can run incentives, you can run leaderboards.
Exactly.
It's pretty useful.
And let's talk about one of the really good skills that has implemented that in India. And it's a very good skill called as bulls and cows. And I would admit it, the very first time I heard about this skill, I was like, okay, that sounds, what kind of a skill is this? I was a bit intrigued. But when I started the game, it's a very simple game. And what it does is Alexa guesses a 4-digit number and you have to guess the number. Now, if Alexa guesses 1, 2, 3, 4 and you guess 1, 2, 5, 6, Alexa is going to say that you have 2 bulls and 0 cows. And what Alexa means by that is you've got 2 numbers in their right position, which is 1 and 2. But then you've got 0 cows. That means you've got none of the other numbers in your listing, but wrong position, right? And the game is so addictive, right? You kind of keep on playing that game again and again. You keep on playing that, so that. And I remember when we found this game in the team, we almost had a championship about who could get to the top of the leaderboard. Right, so kind of stuff like that. And I think the Bulls and Cows team, built by Voxogenic, they also do like monthly giveaways.
It's such an engaging thing to do.
Right.
And I've seen, people. I've seen Voxogenic guys post it on their LinkedIn, and people like, I came close, or I'm so happy I won, etc.
Exactly.
Which also in turn creates a community around the game, which I think is very interesting, because around a game you really want a strong community of people who are playing. They're giving feedback, they're playing against each other, they're talking about strategies, and I'm sure you have heard about communities in other famous games as well. So doing something like this really encourages that community building around the game.
Right. And one of the things that you could do in a leaderboard kind of a game is to announce the user's rank when the game is about to end, and basically say something like, hey, you have finished level 5, congratulations on that, or you have scored the best score of all the time, congratulations, or maybe you are in the 90th percentile of the user. Or you could actually also turn this around and you could say, hey, you are in the bottom 10 percentile of the people playing this game. Do you want to give it another shot so that your score becomes better and you are not in the bottom? 10.
I've actually found those work slightly better, saying something like, hey, you dropped out of the top 5 or you dropped out of the top 3. And people like, oh, let me just
I need to come back. And
so I found those work a little better when it comes to,
exactly
nudging users.
Right. And a lot of this does not need a lot of engineering as such. You don't need to keep on building a new stuff for this. Like I said, go and use the GameOn SDK. And a lot of times you could also use the DynamoDB persistent attributes. And persistent attributes is built into Ask SDK. And what Ask SDK does is it creates one row for each user and it tracks all the attributes. So if you have one user and you need to just track how many times they have played the game, or maybe how many times they have come back, or they have won the game, or their win percentage is high, stuff like that. All of that you can save it in one row, and first 25 GB storage is free. So like you don't have to. 25 GB is like a huge amount of this thing, right? And also think a bit about for each game played, maybe you could save it somewhere that hey, this was the game played by the user, and almost keep a track of what the user has been doing with the game. And you can always come back and do a lot of cool stuff with the user's data. Maybe if you found that the user kept coming to the skill again and again, say in a day they came to the skill 7 times, maybe they are a diehard fan, and maybe you could just give them a hint or a clue about how to go around in the game, right? Treating them premium. That's one way how, and for that I would suggest to create a history table. And what this history table would do is basically just have a history of how many times this user has played the game, or how engaged is this user with the game, right? So yeah, that's one of the things that's going to make your skill look really good.
So we've given you a whole bunch of tips and tricks and strategies that you can employ for your game skill. And I think maybe doing all of these for the one hackathon might not be very easy, but pick and choose which ones work best for your skill. But if you are publishing your skill and you're thinking big, I'd say just do all of these things. But it's also important to keep in mind that you ensure there is skill quality. Now, again, this holds true for any skill, but especially for a game where you have robust utterance support. So, variations of saying the same thing, which I think is a big difference between voice versus, like a mobile app where, like say, Angry Birds, you can just do that one thing where, bird flies or whatever. But on voice, people can say the same thing in different ways. So have that robust support for different utterances. Have personalized and varied prompts. You want some variety in your prompts and stuff. Alexa saying okay, okay repeatedly. You can throw in like okay, Roger, let's go. Sounds good. True. And all of these different
needs to be supported.
And also handle your exits and your failures and successes very gracefully. Right? If some error goes wrong, just don't say error and like stop it.
Sorry, I encountered an error.
People hate that, and even maybe there is that one time where it errors out. See if you can save the skill state, like we said, and so that a user comes back, they have not lost the progress of, like, say, the last 10 levels they've played, which, is a bad experience. So handle these exits very gracefully. Also, when it comes from a content point of view, especially if your skill relies on a lot of content like Jeopardy, like a quiz, etc., make it engaging and keep it fresh. Every time I log into the quiz skill, I don't want the same question, because then I'm like, hey, I'm not learning anything new. This is not challenging me. Like, why am I really doing this?
And you know what? If it's a quiz skill, I have a very good point for that. If you are asking the user a question and the user is not able to give the answer, and has accepted defeat, please tell what the right answer is.
Absolutely.
Because then I don't, I mean, there's this really good game called as Guess the Logo, which we keep playing. And there are some logos in there which I could never figure out.
Yeah, but it doesn't tell you what the right answer is.
What the right answer is. And then how do I go and search for what the right answer is, right? So yeah, just keep that in mind. And fresh content is really important.
Keep things unpredictable, throw in an Easter egg, throw in surprises once in a while. I think that keeps the users on their toes. It keeps them coming back for more. So, find ways to actually add this.
Right. And there are some tool sets that we want you to keep in mind so that you can start building things like this. One of the things, and we talked about this a bit, which is the GameOn SDK. And it's basically at alexa.design/GameOn or GameOn launch. And this basically just is an SDK for Node.js, which you can integrate with your Node.js code. And That's it. There are some code samples at the link. You don't need to worry a lot about it. You can set up leaderboards. You can have in-game prizes, and you can also have a flexible competition creation. Let's say this week you want to run a competition about who plays the most game, stuff like that. That's available through the GameOn SDK.
Yep.
So that is one thing. And if you are more focused on interactive fiction, right? We just launched. We launched a. It's been around for a while. A tool called a Skill Flow Builder. Allows creation of interactive fictions or role-playing games or adventure games like the Magic Door. Right. And the best thing about this is you don't have to do a lot of coding.
Yeah. In fact, if you don't know coding also, it's fine.
Exactly.
There are some few logical steps, but you don't need coding as such.
Exactly. And this is how it looks like. You just need to drag and just say that, hey, if the user says this, do this, or if the user says that, do this. And we've also open sourced the engine behind this, which is called as Litexa. And the programming language is open source. You can go to github.com/Litexa and you can see all the code behind that. Right. So that's what this Litexa stuff does, right? And you can test it out. You can just say that, hey, if the user says something like this, this is what I want you to do. I want you to continue, or call it a day and head down, go to the head home function, or go to the continue function, stuff like that. And that's just really easy to build using Skill Flow Builder. Right.
Now we have about 8 to 9 minutes left. So if you have any questions, this would be the best time before we actually wind up. So feel free to hit the question tab in your GoToWebinar, ask us. We'll try and get as many questions as possible. And then we can go ahead.
And I'd like to take a couple of minutes to show a really cool skill that the Alexa team has built.
Oh yeah.
This is a really good skill called as finish the phrase.
And Karthik was involved in making
it. And that's why it's cool, right? And let's just see if this is coming up there. It's showing up there. Yeah. Okay, so I hope this works. Alexa, open finish the phrase.
Welcome back to Finish the Phrase. It looks like you haven't answered all of today's questions. Would you like to answer the remaining questions for today?
Yes.
All right, let's play. Here is your question. For 20 points. If you can't beat them,
join them. Hey, that's correct. Yes?
Yes, that's it. Here is your final question. For 40 points. The early bird
gets the worm.
You are right. You answered 5 out of 5 questions correctly. For a score of 100 points. Thanks for playing Finish the Phrase. Don't forget to come back tomorrow to continue your daily streak to unlock special question packs.
So the cool thing about this skill is it basically just shows me, the skill just gives me 5 different phrases every day.
Okay.
The first one is pretty easy. The second one is difficult, and so on. And if I finish all of them on that day, I get 100 points. And you notice when the skill was exiting, it said something like, hey, if you come back tomorrow, you are going to continue your streak, right? And you are going to get extra points, and you are going to unlock some really cool stuff.
So it makes you want to come back to this.
Exactly. And it just uses a lot of things, and even the visual, if you look at the visual, so that's a very cool point about visuals is, so on the visual, it just showed me all the 5 corrected answers for today, the answers were defined. But that is not something that it spoke with the voice. The Alexa voice was, you have won for today, you are done for today. But the screen actually showed me all the 5 different answers, 5 phrases that I gave for today, right? So
and that is, I think, an ideal example of how the visuals are complementing the voice.
Exactly.
You're not reading out everything, it's enhancing the experience. It's still voice first, but the visuals are really, enhancing that user experience.
Right. And
before we take the question, and feel free to send in the questions, Karthik, can you tell us a little bit about the webinar, the hackathon, that we're actually doing.
Right, and this is a hackathon where we have partnered with HackerEarth, and a lot of you are on round 2 right now, right? And this is where we have given you 3 use cases, 3 different personal profiles. There's one who's a kid, and there are kids, and then there is a 26-year-old millennial, I would say, and then there is a boomer. Old person, right? So there are just different age sets. Come up with skill ideas, games that would engage these people while playing with this, while playing with Alexa skills, right? So that is the entire focus. And if you go to the hackathon page, and I'm sure you might have gotten that email with the hackathon page from Dhruv, and on that page we have given all the resources, and this webinar is always there to act as a correct link for what you can build. Just build it, submit your skill, and better luck for the next round.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we're just opening up the questions. How do we see the questions here?
Yeah, no questions so far. Looks like we have an audience that knows all the
stuff. That's really
which
cool.
is good.
Yeah, and are we missing something? Oh, let's see. Okay. Right. So no questions.
Hi, Karthik and Sohan. I think we have a few questions on the questions tab. If you could
you have the
just
answer questions ticked on.
Yeah, I'm not able to see.
Yeah, just a minute. I think where's the question tab?
I think Dhruv, as a panelist, we're not able to see the questions, so you'll have to add us as organizers.
just give me a second.
Yeah.
So we've actually received about 5 questions. Maybe I could just ask the questions to you and you all could address them.
Sounds good.
Great. So we have a question here that's he's asking, where can we get sound effects from? Do we have a specific website where we can download these sound effects from?
Right, and that's a good question.
I'll get you the link.
Yeah, so that link is if you go to the test simulator and go to the voice and tone editor, there is a page. You can in fact go to alexa.design/ssml and just search for Alexa Skills Kit sound library. So that should be the correct link, Alexa Skills Kit sound library. Just search for it and you will get it. Yeah.
Great. So we have another question here. So the question is, what about a community gaming rather than an individual user game? So something around building a community game rather than just a user-centric game. So I think the participant wants more clarity around how he would probably go about it.
Yeah. So I mean, it depends on what your game is. Like I said, I think the simplest way to build a community is to have things like leaderboards and notifications when people do something. Having like a live skill, I think, is a little more challenging. Like me playing versus Karthik at this point of time, but that is still possible. Right. You need a very robust backend for something like that, where you'll have to connect at the same time. There's no way, as far as I know, at least, to have like us playing at the same time from remote locations. Sure. But I could play the game and then Karthik could play the game. We could maybe compare scores, that sort of thing.
In fact, there is a really good game called a Song Trivia, and it does the same thing where what it does is it first gives you a song, it makes you play a couple of 5 or 6 songs, it gives it to one user, gets their points, and then it gives it to another user and gets their point, and then finally tells the user that, hey, the competition that you just had, you scored 4 out of it, but this guy scored 5 out of 6, so he wins.
So again, that's an interesting one, because I've played that game. So just doing that for every song would not make sense. So what they do is they have 5 songs. Right, every contest is 5 songs, so it plays you a clip of a song, you answer, plays you another clip, it plays 5 clips like that,
right?
And it's collecting your answers, not telling you whether it's right or wrong. And then at the end it says, hey, you got 3 out of 5 right, Karthik got 5 out of 5 right. Exactly. So there is that element of you playing this versus someone, there's a pressure on you, you don't know what's happening on the other side.
Exactly.
So I think that sort of also brings in that competition.
Great.
Next question, Dhruv.
Also, Dhruv, I've sent you the link for the sound skills, so if you could send it across to everybody, because we as panelists can't send a group message.
Absolutely, I will add that.
Okay.
Here's a question. Do they only have to build games for the use cases that have been mentioned, or can they build other applications that can probably engage the end user?
So Dhruv, on the HackerEarth page, we have given you the use cases. That's what you need to stick to. So
for the hackathon.
For the hackathon. So yes, I mean, we would appreciate if you want to build a skill that's out of the use cases, but then that would not make a sense for the hackathon. So
for the hackathon, you'll be judged on those use cases. But if you have like an amazing idea, I'd say just go ahead, build it, publish it on the store, and
yeah.
Great. Another question here: how to go about authentication with Alexa ID? So I think the participant is facing some issues with it.
Is that the entire question, or do you have anything? Just
I believe that's the entire question.
That's the entire question. Okay. Right. So for Alexa authentication, there are three main ways that you could do it. I think the very first thing that we said is use the customer profile API. Don't use authentication until and unless absolutely needed, right? So if you need the user's email address, and most of the times that's why you need it. You need it for the email address or phone number, right? And that's available because of customer profile API. So use that link. That is very important. If you absolutely need to connect with some kind of say a Facebook account or your own game setup, and you need to do OAuth linking, then you have the OAuth support in account linking. Just go to account, just search for Alexa account linking. You will get the documentation page. Just go through it. Last but not the least, what you could also do is if you want to uniquely identify a user, there's a user ID that you get into the Alexa request, and that user ID is unique for each user. So you can always say that, hey, this is my user who is coming back, so you can always do that. So until and unless absolutely not necessary, don't ask the user for this kind of information. But yeah, and maybe you can ping the Slack channel. If some of you are not on our Slack channel, we have a Slack channel that you can join, and you can ask your technical queries there, and we'll help you out with your code and whatever issues you are having with your skill. And Dhruv, we just sent you the link. If you can just send it to the group chat, that would be great.
Just got it. Yep.
Cool. So I think since we're out of time, we'll just wind up with the conclusion of sorts. I think just need to go back. Yeah. So there's this quote by Max Child, who's the founder of this company called Wally. And what he says is the coolest things about voice control games is that they enable a live multiplayer experience. Voice gives us a unique power and a unique opportunity to create social experiences in a way that the web and mobile really didn't. And I think that's a very powerful quote because, like I said, we're stepping into this new paradigm of voice, and it sort of gives you this new medium and this new way to communicate and engage with games.
Right.
And like I said, I think we have just not even skimmed the surface of the possibilities of this.
Right.
So we're really looking at people such as yourself to uncover those potential.
Yeah, and we are really happy you all attended this webinar, and we hope you take something tangible out of this and really build the skill ideas and make it more engaging. And that's where it's all matters. And Sohan, do you want to finish this up?
I mean, this is a slide that I often use. It shows us how we have evolved from being the ape to being able to stand on our 2 feet, to be able to master tools and build machines. You will often on t-shirts and like wallpapers see this as the next phase, like a human hunched with in front of his mobile phone. But we think this is the next step where your hands are free to create things, to create art, and you can use technology to that's all around you, that's ambient, and that blends seamlessly into your environment. And gaming, I think, is an integral part of that. Yeah. So on that note, think voice first. We're really looking forward to seeing what you all will build. Hopefully this was useful to you and informational, and have a good rest of the day. Thank you.
Thank you everyone. Bye bye.